Dear viewers, the following stories are inspired by real events. However, the names of the characters have been changed to protect privacy. In the summer of 1995, Michael and Jennifer's family and their teenage son Ryan moved to Fall River, Massachusetts. They bought a quaint Victorian house at a bargain price. Attracted by its classic beauty and the history surrounding it, the three-story house with pointed towers and a pitch-black tiled roof was located on a quiet, tree-lined street. From the moment Jennifer stepped into the house, she felt an indescribable sense of unease. The air inside the house seemed colder than outside, and the soft cracking sounds coming from the wooden floors seemed to never stop. Michael was excited by the unique architectural details of the house, while Ryan, the teenage son, just found it a bit old and gloomy. The first few days passed fairly normally, but gradually, strange phenomena began to occur. Jennifer often felt like someone was watching her, especially when she was alone in her room. She also heard light footsteps upstairs when everyone else was downstairs. One evening, while Ryan was in his bedroom on the third floor, he suddenly heard a loud noise coming from the room next door, which they had not yet cleaned. The noise sounded like someone had dropped something very heavy. Ryan cautiously opened the door to his room and looked over. The room was empty, but on the floor, he saw an old hammer lying around. He was sure that the hammer had not been there before. Michael, being a practical person, always tried to find reasonable explanations for these strange phenomena. He thought that the footsteps could be caused by the wind blowing through the cracks, and the loud noises could be caused by the old house expanding due to the change in temperature. Jennifer also tried to believe her husband's explanations, but the feeling of unease in her heart grew stronger. One night, Jennifer woke up in the middle of the night and felt a cold air envelop the room. She opened her eyes and was horrified to see a blurry figure standing at the end of the bed, staring at her. The figure had the shape of a woman, wearing a long white dress, her long black hair hanging down to cover her face. Jennifer tried to scream, but her throat was choked. Unable to make a sound, the figure slowly raised its hand, its long, thin fingers pointing towards her. Michael was startled awake by the strange noise. He turned on the night light and looked around the room, but saw nothing. Jennifer was still lying on the bed, panting and shaking. "What happened, honey?" Michael asked worriedly. Jennifer hugged her husband tightly, tears streaming down her cheeks. I just saw a ghost," she sobbed. "A woman, right here." Michael held his wife tightly, trying to reassure her. He thought she was just having a nightmare, but Jennifer's terrified expression made him worry. The next morning, Jennifer was still dazed and scared. She told Michael what she had seen. This time, Michael didn't try to deny it anymore. He knew that something terrible was happening in this house, something related to its past. They decided to learn about the history of the house, hoping to solve the strange phenomena and find a way to put an end to the hauntings. Michael and Jennifer began their search for information about the history of the house. They went to the local library, where the kind old librarian helped them dig through old newspapers and archives. They also searched the internet, typing in keywords related to the addresses and histories of old houses in Fall River. Soon, they began to find scattered news clippings, creepy stories about their house. Most of them mentioned a horrific murder that had occurred there decades ago. A family had been brutally murdered in this very house. The family's name was Borden. Michael and Jennifer looked at each other in shock. The name sounded terrifyingly familiar. They continued their search and soon realized that they had purchased the very house where Lizzie Borden was accused of murdering her father and stepmother with an axe in 1892. A cold feeling spread through Jennifer. She remembered the shadow of the woman in the white dress she had seen in the bedroom. Her long black hair hung down over her face. Perhaps it was the spirit of one of the victims? Ryan, after hearing about the house's dark history from his parents, was initially intrigued and curious. He began to explore the house on his own, hoping to find any remaining traces of the old case. But soon, he began to experience strange phenomena himself. One afternoon, while Ryan was alone in the living room, he heard the sound of a piano coming from the next room, the one they had not used yet. The sound of the piano was sad and mournful. Like a mournful song, Ryan crept to the door and looked in. But the room was empty, the old piano lying silently covered in dust. The following nights, the piano sounded again, often in the dead of night when everyone was fast asleep. Jennifer also heard soft sobbing somewhere in the house, as if a child was silently suffering. The fear in the house increased. Doors opened and closed by themselves. Furniture was moved without anyone touching it. Michael began to have difficulty breathing and always had a heavy feeling on his chest when he was in the house. One evening, while the whole family was sitting in the kitchen eating dinner, a knife on the table suddenly fell to the floor with a loud clang. Everyone looked at each other in surprise. No one touched the knife, and no amount of shaking could cause it to fall. "I think we should leave," Ryan said, his voice filled with worry. "I don't like being in this house anymore." Jennifer nodded in agreement. "Mom, I think so too. Maybe we made a mistake moving here." But Michael was still hesitant. He didn't want to give up so easily. He believed that there might be a reasonable explanation for all of this. He decided to seek help from a psychic, or an expert in the paranormal. While Michael was searching for information, Jennifer had another terrifying experience. One night, she woke up to see a man standing at the end of her bed. His face was hidden in the darkness, but Jennifer could feel a hateful gaze staring at her. She tried to call out to Michael, but couldn't make a sound. The figure slowly raised something shiny. It seemed to be an axe. Jennifer screamed in terror and passed out. When Michael woke up and saw Jennifer lying motionless on the bed, he was extremely frightened. He quickly called the ambulance. After being examined by the doctor, Jennifer regained consciousness but was still in shock. She insisted that she had seen a ghost holding an axe. Michael knew that they could not stay in this house any longer. He decided to contact a famous psychic, whose information he had found, hoping that this person could help them better understand the hauntings in the house and find a way to free them. Little did they know that the dark past of the Borden house had not yet left them alone, and the most terrifying things were still waiting for them ahead. A few days later, a woman named Lorraine Warren, the character's name has been changed, came to Michael and Jennifer's house. She was a renowned psychic and paranormal investigator with many years of experience solving complex hauntings. Lorraine had a calm and serious demeanor, her sharp eyes scanning every corner of the house as soon as she entered. "Thank you for trusting me," Lorraine said, her voice soft but powerful. "Please tell me the details of what happened." Michael and Jennifer recounted their terrifying experiences, from strange noises and shadowy figures to Jennifer's terrifying dreams. Ryan, initially skeptical, also told of the ghostly piano music he had heard. Lorraine listened attentively, occasionally asking pointed questions. After hearing the family's story, she began to walk around the house, carrying some specialized equipment such as an electromagnetic field, EMF, meter and a tape recorder. She paused for a long time in the living room, where the horrific murder had occurred. The EMF meter in her hand suddenly started flashing continuously, emitting intermittent beeps. "This place has a very strong energy," Lorraine said, her voice dropping. "I sensed deep pain and resentment." She continued upstairs, into Michael and Jennifer's bedroom, where Jennifer had seen the ghost of the woman. The EMF meter was going strong again. Lorraine closed her eyes, seemingly trying to sense what was left in the space. "There's a very strong presence here," she said after a moment. A woman, full of pain and anger. When Lorraine reached Ryan's room on the 3rd floor, she paid special attention to the room next door, where Ryan had heard the piano. She opened the door and entered. The room was cold and damp despite the summer. Lorraine walked over to the dusty old piano, placed her hands on the keys, and closed her eyes. Suddenly, a soft sound was heard, as if someone had touched the keys. Ryan stood in the doorway, his eyes wide with surprise. He was sure no one had touched the piano. "This is a young soul," Lorraine said, her voice sad. "A child, very lonely and scared." Over the next few days, Lorraine stayed at Michael and Jennifer's house, conducting further investigations. She used a tape recorder to record unusual sounds and attempted to communicate with the spirits. She discovered that the house was haunted by many spirits, including those of the Borden murder victims and perhaps those who had lived and died in the house before. One night, while Lorraine was sitting alone in the living room, she suddenly heard a very small voice whispering in her ear, "Don't leave us." Lorraine turned around, startled, but saw no one. She knew that it was one of the spirits trying to contact her. "I will help you," Lorraine whispered. "I will not leave you." However, the more Lorraine tried to dig deeper into the house's past, the more intense and terrifying the supernatural phenomena became. Doors slammed shut, objects floated in the air, and strange noises grew more deafening. Michael and Jennifer began to feel exhausted and hopeless. One evening, as the family sat in the living room with Lorraine, a large black shadow suddenly appeared in the corner of the room. Its shape was twisted and terrifying, as if made of pure darkness. It slowly moved toward them, and a cold air filled the room. Ryan screamed in terror, hugging his parents tightly. Jennifer trembled as well, feeling an overwhelming fear invade her soul. "It's one of the strongest spirits here," Lorraine said, her voice full of warning. "We have to be careful." The shadow stopped in front of them, and a hoarse, hateful voice rang out, "You don't belong here. Leave." Michael stood up, trying to look strong. "We don't want to hurt anyone. We just want to understand what's going on. No one is allowed to disturb our sleep." The ominous voice growled. The shadow raised a bony hand, its fingers long and pointed, towards Ryan. Lorraine quickly stood in front of the boy, holding a cross high. The shadow hissed in pain and backed into the corner of the room, then slowly faded into the darkness. After that incident, Michael and Jennifer knew that they were dealing with a very powerful and dangerous supernatural force. They needed to do something before things got worse. Lorraine told them that she sensed a deep resentment and a dark secret hidden in this house, and they needed to uncover it in order to free the trapped spirits. Their investigation had only just begun, and the worst was yet to come. Lorraine decided to focus on the areas believed to be the epicenter of the Borden murders: Andrew and Abby Borden's bedroom on the 2nd floor, and the downstairs living room where Andrew's body was found. She spent a lot of time in these rooms, using her devices and trying to connect with the remaining energies. In the Borden's bedroom, Lorraine's EMF meter was working hard again. She felt an overwhelming sense of grief and anger permeate the space. She closed her eyes and whispered prayers, trying to appease the spirits trapped in this place. As Lorraine moved down to the living room, she noticed a hidden corner behind an old sofa. She felt an unusually cold aura emanating from it. Lorraine carefully moved the chair, and was horrified to see a dark brown stain on the wooden floor. An odd shape as if someone had fallen there and left a trail of blood. This place. Something bad happened here, Lorraine said, her voice trembling. While Lorraine was exploring the living room, Ryan was upstairs in his bedroom. He felt an unusual chill envelop the room. Suddenly, he heard a cold whisper right next to his ear. "Get out of here." Ryan turned around in surprise, but saw no one. He felt a cold hand lightly touch his shoulder, sending shivers down his spine. He rushed downstairs, his face pale with fear. "I just heard someone whispering to me," Ryan stammered to his parents and Lorraine. "And I felt someone touching me." Lorraine looked at Ryan with concern. "Son, I think there is a very strong and scary spirit targeting you. You must be careful." In the following days, Lorraine conducted several Ouija sessions in the living room, hoping to communicate directly with the spirits haunting the house. During one session, the small table in the middle of the room suddenly shook violently, and the candles went out. A hoarse and hateful voice rang out in the air. "You have awakened my anger." Michael looked skeptical. "Lorraine, are you sure this isn't a prank?" Lorraine shook her head, her expression serious. "No, Michael, this isn't a prank. There's a huge grudge here, and it's growing stronger." Jennifer was starting to feel desperate. She couldn't take it anymore. "What are we going to do, Lorraine? We can't keep living in fear. We need to find out where this grudge is coming from," Lorraine said. "I believe there's some dark secret hidden in this house's past, and it's binding the spirits here." Lorraine continued to research the Borden family history. She read the Lizzie Borden trials and the testimony of witnesses. She discovered many conflicting details and unsolved mysteries surrounding the case. One evening, while Lorraine was alone in Andrew Borden's bedroom, she suddenly saw a blurry image appear before her eyes. It was the image of a middle-aged man, his face full of anger and pain, holding an axe covered in blood. The image only lasted for a brief moment and then disappeared, but it left a deep impression on Lorraine's mind. Lorraine believed that she had seen the spirit of Andrew Borden, and that he was trying to convey something to her. She felt his resentment and extreme pain. After many days of investigation, Lorraine finally found a terrible secret. She discovered that before he was murdered, Andrew Borden had a fierce argument with Lizzie about the property. There were rumors that Andrew had changed the will and disinherited Lizzie. Lorraine suspects that it is this resentment that led to the horrific murders. But she also senses another terrifying presence in the house, a much darker and more sinister energy. She believes that it is not just the souls of the victims trapped here, but also some evil force, exploiting their suffering to harass and haunt the people living in this house. Lorraine knows that they are facing a greater danger than they could have imagined, and the fight against the darkness has only just begun. Lorraine realizes that they are not only dealing with the tormented souls of the Borden family, but also with a dark and terrifying force that is exploiting that suffering to cause horrors. She decides that it is time to face this force directly. "We need to perform a ritual to cleanse the house," Lorraine tells Michael and Jennifer, her voice firm. This is the only way to free the trapped spirits and drive away this evil force. Michael and Jennifer agreed immediately. They were so tired and scared. They were willing to do anything to make these hauntings stop. Ryan, though still very scared, was strong and determined. Lorraine began to prepare for the ritual. She brought religious items, crosses, holy water, and ancient scriptures. She instructed Michael and Jennifer on how to recite prayers and keep their faith. That night, when the ritual began, the atmosphere in the house became heavier and more terrifying than ever. The candles flickered violently. The darkness seemed to thicken and cover every corner. Strange noises rang out everywhere. The sound of wooden floors breaking, the sound of furniture being knocked over, and the cold whispers became more and more clear and terrifying. Suddenly, a cold wind blew through the living room. The windows shook violently. The terrifying shadow they had seen before appeared in the corner of the room again. This time it looked much clearer and more terrifying. Its figure was tall and twisted. Its eyes were red like burning coals, staring at Lorraine and Michael's family. "You cannot stop me," a hoarse and hateful voice rang out from the shadow. "This house is mine." Lorraine raised the cross high and began to recite prayers in Latin. The faint light from the cross seemed to make the shadow shrink. But it quickly growled and rushed towards Ryan. Michael quickly pushed Ryan behind him, trying to shield his son. The shadow swung its arm. A dark energy shot out, knocking Michael backwards. Jennifer screamed in horror and ran to her husband's side. Lorraine continued to chant, her voice becoming stronger and more determined. As Lorraine's prayers echoed throughout the house, the shadow began to tremble and shrink. It let out painful and angry screams, and objects in the living room began to fly and smash violently. Ryan, though very scared, still tried to stay calm. He remembered what Lorraine had told him and began to chant the prayers she had taught him. His childish voice mixed with Lorraine's, forming a strange power. The light from the crosses seemed to grow stronger, pushing back the darkness. The terrifying shadow screamed in despair, then slowly dissipated into the air, leaving behind a foul stench. After a while, the room returned to silence. The candles burned normally again, and the cold, terrifying air also dissipated. Lorraine sighed in relief, knowing that they had won. In the days that followed, the house became strangely peaceful. There were no more strange noises, no more ghosts, no more uneasiness that hung over the Michael family. They felt a sense of peace and relief, as if a huge burden had been lifted. Lorraine told them that the Borden family spirits had finally found rest. The evil force had been banished, and the house was freed from the hauntings of the past. Michael and Jennifer were extremely grateful to Lorraine. They knew that without her help, they probably would not have survived the past terrible days. The Michael family's life gradually returned to normal. Ryan no longer had nightmares, and Jennifer no longer felt uneasy when alone in the house. They overcame a terrible challenge and became stronger than ever. However, they will never forget what happened in the old house in Fall River. They know that supernatural forces still exist around us, and sometimes, the past can come back to haunt those living in the present. If you find this story interesting and want to hear more horror ghost stories, don't forget to like, share and subscribe to my channel. Goodbye and see you in the next videos.